Alrighty, folks, thanks for joining us. Quite frankly, we're using some beta software, so this is a beta broadcast. Unscheduled live broadcast, and what I'm doing is I got some software we should hopefully be able to broadcast live through several platforms, whether it's our Facebook page, you want to look up Offshore Insider Sports Betting Picks on Facebook, or our YouTube page, which is slash Offshore Insiders, and we started a Periscope page, plus a couple other streaming platforms. And the goal is, once we make sure that all the software works great, we got everything down pat, we've programmed this to be doing a lot more live broadcasts for you. But this is unscheduled, kind of an experimental broadcast just to make sure everything goes well. But that being said, we're going to have some great information for you. We are going to discuss the so-called sweat barometer. Make sure you do follow us on Twitter at Offshore Insider. And that way you will get notification anytime we do a live broadcast. The sweat barometer, now for those of you who are not quite familiar with it, the sweat barometer is what's also known as the ATS margin. And essentially what it is you see how much a team covers by. Also called the ATS margin. I used to call it the margin of cover. So the top teams to bet on based on the so-called sweat barometer or the margin of cover this year. And again, it is how much a team does or does not cover by. The amount that they do cover the spread by. Arkansas State has been the best team this year. They have a 6-1 spread record, but they've covered by an average of 15.1 points per game. So you can see Iowa State just behind them at 7-1. Central Florida at 5-1. Florida Atlantic behind them. But again, we are putting our rankings based on spread margin because the mere spread records can be a bit deceptive. What if a team is covering by just a half a point or a point? And really, it could depend on where and when you bet it. In some cases, like the Georgia Tech Clemson game last week. That game landed on 14. Depending on where you bet it, it could have been a push. And when you bet it, it could have been a Clemson cover. It could have been a Georgia Tech cover. But when we're talking about the margin of cover, that tells us whether or not a team is clearly overvalued or undervalued. So if a team is covering by a wide margin, the theory being that the odds makers are well behind that team. But in the NFL and the NBA, which are more regression of the mean sports, we've actually found out teams with the worst sweat barometer are actually the better bets. But now let's see what the best teams to bet against. And as I said, make sure you do follow us on Twitter. How about the best teams to bet against? Ball State, the worst team in the country, missing their covers by an average of 15.1 points per game, although they have a somewhat respectable 3-5 record. When you dig deeper, you find out they really haven't been close. Florida State, they've been atrocious. Second worst team in the country based on spread margin, failing to cover by an average of almost 11 points per game. Louisville, look, you had that written up. I think when I did some broadcasts earlier this year during the offseason, I should say, not earlier this year, but actually before the year started, the football year, that is with the big man on campus. I think I said Louisville would probably be the worst spread team in the country because, with Lamar Jackson, their value wasn't going to drop, but he had very little of a supporting cast. So they are one of the best teams to bet against, both as far as spread record and the margin of cover. And Oregon State, they've been interesting. Remember, we did have our Pac-12 game of the year when they covered against USC, and admittedly, we did have to, that's why some people call it the sweat barometer. We did have to sweat it out at the end, but we did get that cover, and they are missing covering by an average of 10 points per game. And make sure, as I said, you do visit us at offshoreinsiders.com. Now, the best over teams. North Texas going over by an average of 16.1 points per game, 6 of 8 this year. Louisiana Monroe, the same over record, but by only 14.7. Now, Maryland True, if you've bet on the over in each one of their games, you'd have won a little bit more money, but they've only gone over, only, quote-unquote, by an average of 13.8. So the odds makers may or may not be as far behind them as they are North Texas and Louisiana Monroe. Air Force and Ohio round out the best over teams. So, of course, we took a look at the best over teams. What are we going to take a look at next? You guessed it. The best under teams. And by the way, if you do like this video, please like us, whether you're watching on Facebook, whether you're watching on YouTube. I got to admit, I am a kind of a virgin on Periscope, but we're going to play around with that a little bit more, assuming all this software works the way we're expecting it to. But make sure you visit us at offshoreinsiders.com for the best picks and the most thoroughly vetted sports books. And make sure you do like this video, share it. You can embed it on your own website. We very much encourage you to do that. The best under teams, as you can see, Purdue and Eastern Michigan have each gone under 6 of 8. Middle Tennessee State, in terms of percentage, they haven't gone over all year, and they're very close. Purdue has gone under by an average of 11.5. Eastern Michigan by 11.2. Syracuse will be a surprise to many. Look, you've got a very high total in all Syracuse's games because Dino Babers, one of the most up-tempo coaches in the country, and people, a lot of sharps, quite frankly, these lines were bet up. So these are bet on the closing lines. And Syracuse, a lot of their lines had gone up when it came to totals because sharps said, look, Dino Babers a year under his belt. The players are comfortable with it. They had a very solid quarterback. A lot of people were betting those games over. There were some middle opportunities, or as we like to call them, bet middler opportunities. But Syracuse, to the surprise of many, has been an under team this year. And, one of the top under teams, both in terms of record and in terms of over-under margin. Well, we know exactly how to use these statistics at offshoreinsiders.com. Nobody does it better than we do. And let me see, let's get this back up. As I said, the ecom, there we go. But, we do plan on doing live broadcast here at offshoreinsiders.com, both as far as on Facebook, YouTube Live, and as we said, we are just starting a brand new channel on Periscope, and there's a couple other ones. We may even do some that are more popular in other countries. So again, thank you for joining me for this kind of beta broadcast unscheduled. Hopefully, we will start scheduling these on a regular basis when we work out the different kinks in the software, make sure it works, etc. But make sure you visit me at offshoreinsiders.com on a daily basis.